In the dim cloisters of a secluded convent perched on the misty hills outside London in 1625, Sister Agnes bolted through the echoing stone corridors, her rosary beads clattering against her habit like frantic heartbeats. The air was thick with the scent of incense and fear, and behind her, an unnatural shadow slithered along the walls, its form twisting like smoke from a forbidden fire. She had been praying alone in the chapel when it first manifested. A demon born of ancient curses whispered to haunt those who dared uncover the convent's buried secrets. Her breath ragged, Agnes clutched a vial of holy water, splashing it wildly over her shoulder as the shadow lunged, its icy tendrils grazing her skin and sending a jolt of burning cold through her veins. This was no mere night terror, it was a hunt, and she was the prey in an epic battle for her soul's survival. Picture this with me. The flickering candlelight casting elongated figures on the damp walls, your own pulse quickening as if he were there, running alongside her. What would you do in that split second when the darkness itself comes alive? Hold that thought. It's the spark of curiosity that pulls us into stories like this, reminding us how fragile our world really is against the unseen. Agnes burst through the heavy oak door into the convent's courtyard, the chill autumn wind whipping her veil. The moon hung low, a sickly crescent that offered little light, but she couldn't stop. The shadow demon, a haunted soul twisted by centuries of malice, perhaps the remnant of a bishop executed for heresy, had been summoned unwittingly when she discovered a hidden grimoire in the library earlier that evening. Flipping through its yellowed pages during her solitary vigil, she had read aloud a forbidden incantation, mistaking it for a lost prayer. That single act unleashed the entity, its presence announced by a low growl that rattled the shelves, books tumbling like dominoes in a chain of doom. Now, as she fled toward the forest bordering the convent, the demon's pursuit intensified. Its form coalesced into a hulking silhouette, claws scraping against the cobblestones with a sound like nails on slate. Agnes's mind raced. She remembered tales from the Malleus Maleficarum, the hammer against witches, which spoke of such shadows as servants of the devil, repelled only by faith and sacred rites. She paused just long enough to tear a sprig of rue from the herb garden, a plant lauded in those texts for warding evil, crushing it in her palm and smearing the bitter juice across her forehead. The demon recoiled momentarily, hissing like steam from a cauldron, but it was only a brief reprieve. This survival wasn't about strength alone. It was a desperate weave of ancient knowledge and raw will, each step propelling her deeper into peril. The forest swallowed her whole, branches clawing at her like accusatory fingers. Leaves crunched underfoot, masking any approach, but Agnes pressed on, her lungs burning. She wasn't alone in her knowledge. Earlier that day, she had confided in Father Elias, the elderly priest who oversaw the convent's spiritual affairs. He had warned her of the grimoire's dangers, his voice trembling with memories of the witch trials sweeping England. "The shadows feed on doubt," he'd said, pressing a wooden cross into her hands. Now that cross dangled from her neck, a talisman she gripped as she navigated the twisted paths. But the demon was cunning. It whispered illusions into the wind, voices of long-dead nuns pleading for mercy, their cries echoing like lost souls in purgatory. Feel the weight of that isolation for a moment. Imagine the trees closing in, every rustle a potential threat. It's that promise of inner strength emerging from chaos that keeps us hooked, transforming fear into a path toward resilience. Agnes stumbled upon a narrow stream, its waters murmuring secrets. She knelt briefly, dipping her vial to replenish the holy water, blessed that morning in the chapel. As she rose, the first major twist struck upon them. A sudden storm erupted overhead, thunder booming like the judgment of God himself. Rain hammered down, turning the earth to sludge, and lightning illuminated the demon's full form, a writhing mass of shadows with glowing crimson eyes, towering over her like a forsaken bishop specter. The storm wasn't natural. It was the demon's doing, summoned to drown her resolve. Water sluiced over her, mixing with tears of terror, but she splashed the holy water upstream, creating a makeshift barrier that sizzled and steamed where it met the advancing shadow. The demon shrieked, a sound that pierced the night like 1,000 needles, retreating into the underbrush. But this victory chained into greater danger. Agnes slipped in the mud, twisting her ankle with a sharp crack of pain. Limping now, she pushed toward a distant light, the flickering torches of a nearby village nestled at the forest's edge. Whispers of the demon's history flooded her mind. Legend spoke of it as the soul of Bishop Thorn, burned at the stake for consorting with dark forces 4 centuries prior, his essence bound to the shadows by a curse from the very nuns he had persecuted. If she could reach the village temple, perhaps the collective faith there could aid her. As she neared the tree line, the second conflict unfolded with merciless precision. Screams rent the air, not her own, but ethereal cries for help, mimicking the voices of children from the village orphanage run by the convent. "Sister, save us!" they wailed, drawing her off-path toward a hidden cave mouth yawning in the hillside. The demon's trickery was masterful. The illusions pulled at her vowed to protect the innocent, a core tenet of her order. Heart pounding, Agnes hesitated, then entered the cave. Torchless, but guided by faint bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls. Inside, the air grew stale, heavy with the rot of forgotten things. Shadows danced unnaturally, and suddenly the demon attacked, a tendril whipping out to ensnare her wrist, draining her warmth like a leech on the soul. Panic surged. She yanked free, but the effort sent her tumbling deeper into the cavern. There, in the gloom, she spotted a glimmer, an abandoned rosary, perhaps left by a lost pilgrim. Clutching it, she recited the Ave Maria, beads clicking like a metronome of defiance. The demon pressed closer, its form filling the cave's entrance, blocking escape. But Agnes remembered the group hunting methods from the Malleus Maleficarum. Evil thrived in solitude, weakened by unity. Though alone, she invoked the spirits of her sister nuns in prayer, imagining them circling her in protection. The rosary glowed faintly, repelling the shadow just enough for her to scramble toward a narrow fissure at the rear of the cave, emerging into the storm-ravaged night. Breathe in that moment of narrow escape. It's the kind of raw human grit that stories like this celebrate, showing how even in darkness, a spark of collective memory can light the way. Drenched and aching, Agnes staggered onto the village streets, cobblestones slick under her feet. Lanterns swung from hooks outside modest houses, casting pools of light that the demon shunned. She pounded on the door of the temple, a sturdy stone edifice at the village center, its bell tower piercing the sky like a sentinel. Father Elias answered, his face paling at her disheveled state. The shadow! It's here!" she gasped, collapsing into his arms. Inside the temple, warmth from the hearth offered fleeting comfort, but the demon was relentless. As Father Elias barred the doors, enlisting 2 teenage acolytes, young Thomas and Eliza, orphans under the convent's care, to assist, the third twist exploded upon them. A horde of ghostly apparitions materialized outside, pounding on the windows with spectral fists, haunted souls, former victims of the demon, their faces twisted in eternal agony. Thunder crashed anew, shaking the foundations, and screams filled the air, cries for help that blurred the line between illusion and reality. The demon, feeding on the storm's energy, breached the threshold, its shadow seeping under the door like ink. Tension coiled like a spring. The group formed a circle around the altar, protecting the teenagers per their sacred duties. Father Elias sprinkled holy water in a ring, chanting exorcism rites from the Malleus Maleficarum, while Agnes distributed herbs, vervain and St. John's wort, urging them to chew and anoint themselves. "We hunted together," she declared, her voice steady despite the fear. The ghosts battered the barriers, glass cracking, but the group's unity held, each prayer amplifying the next, like echoing dominoes. The climax surged into a vortex of life or death fury. The shadow demon fully manifested in the nave, a colossal entity with writhing tentacles and the decayed visage of Bishop Thorn, roaring promises of damnation. It lashed out, knocking Father Elias aside, his cross skittering across the floor. Agnes dove for it, but a tendril wrapped her throat, lifting her off the ground, vision blurring as cold oblivion beckoned. Thomas and Eliza,
wide-eyed but resolute, grabbed rosaries and joined the fray. Thomas flinging holy water that burned the demon's hide, Eliza reciting verses with trembling fervor. Father Elias, bloodied but unbowed, rose to thrust his own cross into the beast's core. Agnes, choking, mustered her last strength, smashing her vial against the demon's form. Holy water exploded in a cascade of light, herbs igniting in ethereal flames. The entity convulsed, its grip loosening as the group closed in, a desperate symphony of survival. Screams peaked, thunder deafening, but in that maelstrom, Agnes felt a surge of divine warmth. With a final unified cry, "In the name of the Father," they drove the cross deeper, the demon imploding in a whirlwind of shadows, souls scattering like ash in the wind. Silence descended, heavy and profound. The storm abated, rain tapering to a gentle patter. Agnes slumped to the floor, breath returning in gasps.